YOLO everybody, welcome to YOLO Learning. So this is skill 4 for the trigonometric function, and this is the last skill, and because of that, as you kind of expect, it is the most complicated one. However, I will try my best to make it as simple as possible with using some of the patterns of the rules, okay? So let's take a look at this, and it says finding an equation from a graph, and when you are asked to, or when you're learning how to find an equation from a graph, that actually means that you're also expected to know how to graph an equation, which we already did that in the skill 3, and we also went through briefly about what A, B, C, and D does and how they actually represent the graph. So let's recap that, and then here we have A affects Y values. Remember, that's the vertical, so that's Y, and that actually affects our amplitude. So it changes our amplitude by multiplying by the A. Remember, in the transformations it says by a factor of, right? Then because of that, it affects our maximum and then the minimum value. So using the A, we can actually find what the maximum and the minimum, or the vice versa. Knowing what the maximum and minimum, we can find what the A value is. Now for the B, it affects the X values since it's the horizontal compression or the stretch, and it tells me the frequency, it tells me the period, it tells me the length of one cycle. And because of that, it can actually tell me the end value of the function, so the end value with the C value, the first point. Now then the C gives me the first point as we examined it before, and you combining C and B, you will be able to find the other ending point, or the last point per se. Now D then translates the function up or right, therefore it tells me the EAS, and that's basically the middle of it, and it also gives me the maximum or the minimum. So either way you can find these, which means if you know your maximum and minimum, you can find your A and D value. If you know how long a period is, then you will be able to find the B. And knowing what the C is with the B, you will be able to find the last point. Then what about the points in the middle? Well, remember, the sine and cosine function, the sinusoidal function, can be divided into 4 equal segments in the horizontal values using the period. So the middle ones, you basically divide the period by 4 and then keep adding to the first point, or keep subtracting to the first point, and you will be able to find. The next one, we have NPC, equation my eggs. Well, it's eggs. Now find the sine and cosine function equation of the following sinusoidal graph. Well, the answer, I already put it there. But in order for us to prove this, we need to know how to do it. So let's take a look at this. First step is to find the maximum and minimum. Why do we do that? Well, if you know maximum and minimum, we know that we can find A and D. So let's choose a cycle, and when you choose a cycle, I usually choose from the maximum to the maximum instead of the middle. So I will choose from here to there. It really doesn't matter. You can choose from here to there. You can choose from here to there. They are exactly the same. So because of that, your answer may not be exactly the same as your friends, or not exactly the same as your teachers. But remember this, if you chose this as your starting point, but your teacher chose this as his or her starting point, all you have to do is to see whether this plus the period going to the right is the same as their starting point, okay? Or the first point. If it is this that your friends chose and this is your first point, well then you have 1, 2, 3 periods. So you basically add the 3 periods to your first point, the C value, and see whether that is the same as your friends. So for now, I'm going to choose these two. So the maximum here is 9. The minimum is right here, which is then -1. So for my A, the amplitude, it is maximum minus minimum divided by 2. And that gives me 9 minus -1 over 2, which is 5. So I found the A. Now then D is the maximum plus the minimum divided by 2. So 9 plus -1 over 2, and that gives me 4. And this tells me my EAS. So if you see, my EAS is right there, that's 4, just to check. the distance between the EAS and my max is 5, and the distance over there is also 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It does make sense that we actually do this way to find the A and D. So that's the first. Now, then the second is draw the EAS. And when you draw the EAS, you will be able to find the starting point of the sine graph. And why do And why do we have to do that here? Well, it says we have to find the sine and cosine. If it is asking you to find the only cosine, you don't really need to graph the EAS. But since you're looking for the sine graph, you need to draw the EAS so that you will be able to figure out what your starting point is, or the first point is. So here we have this as the EAS, y equals 4, and that's 4, okay? And for the sine, remember, without any vertical reflection, you must go from middle to the max. So I will use the blue for the sine. So this one for the sine as my starting point rather than this one. Because this one, then I have to apply the reflection. So unless the question specifies that your equation must have reflection on it, you can simply choose this one. Or you can choose even this one. Or you can choose that one. It really doesn't matter because it is a periodic function. So then for sine, my C is then 0. It's actually happening at 0 degrees. Now then the third step is to find the period, so that we can find the B. The period from my starting point to my ending point for the cosine is then 225, since each square is 45 degrees, and that's 1 square after 180, subtracting 45 degrees, which is then 180 degrees. So this is my period. So my period is always 360 divided by B. Remember that from the last skill? So 180 equals 360 degrees divided by B, therefore B is then 2. So we found the B. That's good. And that means within 360 degrees, your function happens twice. So that's why it's called a frequency. Within the given period, 360 degrees, the regular one, how many times does your function happen? It happens twice, because its period in this case is 180 degrees. So then we've found A, B, C, and D. So all we have to do is then construct the equation. So for the cosine, we can say it is y equals 5 cos 2x. Now the cosine starts from 45 degrees, so minus 45, since it's a positive, 45, right? Plus 4. So that's going to be my cosine. My sine is going to be y then equals. Remember, they share the same amplitude, same period, and same EAS. Therefore, their A, their D, their B are exactly the same as the cosines. So they do not change. So 5 sine 2x, and then plus 4. The only difference is the C, but we already found the C to be 0, so then minus 0. Well, we don't really need to say it's minus 0, so I will just put 2x. And if we compare our sine function over here, exactly the same, right? So that's how we do. As long as you remember these 4 or 3 steps, then it could be quite easy. Now, next one, exactly the same, but this time your x-axis is not in degrees. It's in just the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Will it be different in terms of how to do it? No, it's exactly the same. So let's actually try this. NPC, drop it already. Yeah, I guess I have to drop it, this type of corny names of the NPC, but it kind of is fun for me. Now, find the sinusoidal equation of the following graph. Again, the same thing. It says find the sinusoidal equation. That means, do I really need to worry about sine or cosine? Not really. It could be either of. In that case, I always choose cosine because it's easy to figure out what my C value is, which is the starting or the first point, because I don't have to draw the EAS on the graph. So I'm going to choose that one as my first and that one as my last. So the first one is max and min. So the maximum here is 5, minimum here is at 1. Therefore, my A is maximum subtracting minimum divided by 2, which is 2. My D is maximum plus minimum divided by 2, which is then 3. So that's the first. Done. The second, the starting point. Well, I told you this is my starting point. Therefore, the x value of the starting point, I will say approximately negative 2.5. Then the third step is the period. This is my start, this is my end, or the first and the last, and the length of the cycle from the start to the end is then positive 2.5 subtracting negative 2.5, last or the end point, or start or the initial point, and that's 5. So my period is 5. Therefore, my B works in the same way. 5 equals the period equals 360 divided by B. And in order for you to find the B at the bottom, all we have to do is we swap these two. So then B equals 360 divided by 5. That is then 72. So we found the B. Therefore, your equation is f at x, or y, equals 2. Now, I don't have to apply the reflections here since I'm starting from the max. If I choose to start from the minimum over there, then my amplitude will be negative. So don't forget that, okay? Depending on whether the value that you're starting is maximum or minimum, it determines whether it is vertically reflected or not. Now, so then 2 cosine, since we're starting from the max, and the B is 72, x minus c, so x minus negative 2.5 plus 3. And remember, negative becomes positive, therefore this negative 2.5 becomes positive 2.5, so let's actually just change that to plus 2.5. And then done. That is basically it. Now, if you really want to find the sine graph, all you can go is by doing or drawing the EAS. However, remember, they are on the same graph per se, and because of that, by using quarter of a period moving either to the left or to the right, you will be able to find what the first point of that is. So in this case, I'm going to say this point right here is for the sine. We know D is 3, EAS is 3, right? So obviously we know this is the starting point of the sine. However, according to this, we're not even sure whether that is 1.2, 1.3, or 1 point even, I don't even know. And we do need the exact value for this. And remember, our cosine function and sine function do share the same A, do share same D, and then do share the B, the same B, so 72. The only difference is the C, so the next. So our new C is from the cosines starting to the left by a quarter of a period. So our period is 5, and then quarter of that is 5 over 4. Using a calculator, you can tell that this is 1.25. And I am moving it to the left. So it was x plus 2.5, and I am moving it towards the left further by 1.25, therefore plus 1.25, because I'm moving towards the left. Therefore, my new equation for the sine is then 72, x plus 3.75 plus 3. Or you can choose this one to be your new or this one to be your new. Doesn't really matter. They actually do represent exactly the same.